Phil, tell me what you think we should know about your background and why did you enter into this longevity industry?
The health warning on my story is that I'm a sales and marketing guy, right? So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a clinician. I have built my career working in early stage startup businesses. And really what I was looking for when I was in the middle of the last decade was trying to find a new industry that I could really look as my last industry that I participate in as a market builder. And I wasn't really looking actively for longevity, but it was in fact when I read about Juvenescence and their 50 million raise back in 2018, that's when the lights came on. And I started looking at the industry. I read, all the work, obviously Aubrey's on the call. I read some of his stuff in Technology Review, some of that very early thinking. And I read Jim Mellon's book and I looked at really what was going on in the space. And I figured there's a lot of exciting things happening, but there's a lot of confusing messages coming out of the marketplace. And to try and identify how you construct it, which is part of my presentation today, was something that I really put myself tasked myself with doing. And between 2018 and 2019, I decided that actually I could be participating in this industry. I could be in a position where my skills could come to bear and maybe bring some value to the industry. And yeah, I put my own money into this. I employed some journalists, we rented some offices, and we launched in September 2019. And since that time, it's been the gift that keeps on giving, and I think we're getting close. I think this industry is really consolidating now, and the market is the awareness of the market is happening outside of our own industry. And yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm really honored to be part of all of this and honored to be with you today.
We're speaking here the same language. So what I'll ask you to do, and I ask you to prepare a 25 minute presentation, which is unusual for us, but I saw your presentation, and your presentation is about data that I think we all could see, and then we'll take it from there.
Perfect. Great. Well, I'm going to start my presentation with a very bad dad joke. So the joke is, what do you call somebody that hangs around with musicians? And the answer to that question is a drummer. And it's not very fair to drummers, actually, as a joke, because there are some absolutely great drummers out there. And this story has a sort of this joke has a correlation to the wall that's actually just on the other side of the wall where I am here. This is the hall of my home, and we have all of our relatives as black and white photographs all the way up the stairs and on the landing. So 15 to 20 to 35% of my whole family's DNA and health concerns are all laid out on that wall. And if you look closely, there's a picture of this 1980s rock band. And if you look even closer, you'll see that there's this guy at the back with hair, I must say. And the key thing is that, of course, that guy's a drummer, and that guy is me. So I'm no longer a guy that hangs around with talented musicians. I'm a guy that hangs around now with leading scientists, top VCs, top physicians. And I really see that my role in the industry is not to dictate the direction of the industry, but to really be in a position where I can help the industry grow. I'm part of it in terms of counting the data, and I'm going to go into that data today and in more detail than I normally do about how we actually count data and what's in and what's out of that data. So sort of taking you back from 1986 to 2018, which is when I started looking at the longevity market, to where we are now in 2024. And obviously longevity technology is part of the ecosystem. We've worked hard to build our place in this system, and we try very hard to keep everything as high quality as we possibly can. And as we all know, the industry is really picking up now. We're hitting, as you can see, mainstream media. We're all getting emails from colleagues to say, have you seen this? And, Nir, you're in a lot of these articles as well. And then, of course, we've got a lot of things happening on the influencer side. There's the work that Brian Johnson is doing, whether you like it or hate it. It's building awareness in the community and in the user community and the general population that aging is plastic, and that's helpful to us. And then, of course, you've got big corporations coming in. Dior, Estee Lauder are just two examples. But of course, What's very exciting is the fact that Big Pharma is very much involved as well. And these GLP-1s and the work that Novo Nordisk are doing is very exciting. And I'm going to talk a bit about that today. So in relation to where the industry is as it stands right now, this is the Gartner hype cycle. Many of you will be familiar with it. But really, in terms of where longevity is, I feel that we're not really yet at that stage yet of the overall industry being at that point of inflated expectations. But the reality is, of course, is that there are multiple assets to the longevity industry, all people doing different things, whether you're a clinic, a supplement manufacturer, whether you're doing cellular reprogramming or whatever it may be. So, of course, different parts of the industry are all at different stages. So we have a tendency to look at it very simply. We go, okay, what is now longevity and what is next longevity? So let me just go to my next slide. So this is a diagram that we've used. This is actually version 4 of the diagram. The one that I put together in 2019 looks very comical now. And I'm going to go into this in great detail today because this is really important to identify how we segment the marketplace and then how we count the marketplace. So the key thing for us is that, of course, it can be highly complicated. And as I get into the detail today, it is complicated to identify and quantify the size of this industry. But as you can see, this is 25 different domains of longevity. And this is what they actually look like. So these are the 25 domains of longevity that we analyze. You will see here that there are many that people on the call are participating in themselves. But when you actually look at what that looks like from a longevity biotech perspective, of course, it's what is in the next marketplace. But in relation to where the industry is now, it's quite interesting to see what's going on. And I know this is the Longevity Biotech Association, but I thought it'd be quite interesting just to go through what's actually happening outside of this industry. So when you look at what's happening, for example, in the supplements industry, you can see that, again, like most sectors, 2021 was the breakout year for investment. The 2022 and 2023 have been really tough. And when you look at the chart here, this is actually an in-revenue company. They're publicly quoted, and you can see the difference between their revenue and their market capitalization is pretty horrible, right? I mean, the actual revenue to value equation there is really challenging. So I guess that as Aubrey has said in the past, the vagaries of being in the public domain and being publicly quoted is really challenging. But of course, that's going to be part of the journey for many of the biotechs that are part of the association today. One thing that I'm particularly passionate about and quite agitated about is the clinical layer that this whole industry needs. Now, of course, lots of longevity clinics are emerging. I'm sure some of you have been invited to be on advisory panels or to support these particular clinics that are coming up all over the place. The key thing is, of course, is that that's great, because really what we're seeing is that there is actually a delivery layer for what's happening, whether it's a non-biotech or a biotech solution into the marketplace. And I personally have benefited from visiting longevity clinics. They've identified underlying health conditions that are reversible, and I am reversing them. But when you actually look at the way we did this survey, and you can see here that actually there's still not a massive consensus in the industry of longevity clinicians is what they're actually trying to achieve. Are they precision medicine clinics? Are they previously aesthetics clinics that are coming now over into longevity and piling into the hype associated with longevity? So you can see outside of the biotech industry, everything's not as mature as we would like it to be. But of course, we see that really the Longevity Biotech Association, its members, and all those amazing biotech companies in the world are going to change the way things are for the rest of us. I mean, I genuinely feel that biotech is going to change the world, and the way that we think about life, the way we think about death, is fundamentally going to change over the next decade. And it's great that we're all part of it, because it's going to be, as we all know, a very, very huge sector. So the way that we actually went through 2 years ago now, a very difficult process to go through how we actually identify the processes associated with aging, how we categorize those into the therapies that we are looking at today, and really where does traditional healthcare fit into all of this? Because there's always been a challenge in us as an industry, as well as a business, for us to count the industry. Is what is traditional healthcare, whether it's supporting cardiovascular disease, for example, and what is longevity. So I'm going to talk about that in a lot more detail today. So of course, the aging drivers that sit in the middle of this diagram here, they're very key. You know, we all know a lot of the terms here. There's the hallmarks of aging, and obviously all of these aging drivers are pushing towards those aging diseases. And of course, that's where we all feel the fundamental opportunity is to affect both health span and obviously prevent those diseases of aging. And the way that we've looked at the industry is, as you can see by these 4 pillars here. Obviously, there's only 3 pillars because one's going horizontal, but effectively you've got prevention, which obviously is making sure that those aging drivers don't happen in the first place. Then there's renewal, which of course is when those aging drivers are active in the bodies, being able to reverse those and remove their effect on the body's metabolism to avoid getting to those diseases of aging. And then of course you do have those very interesting treatments that are out there, but that's the closest point to the traditional healthcare industry as we see it. And then underneath all of that, of course, is diagnostics. Now, of course, we're all very exercised about biomarkers of aging, and rightly so. The whole industry will need to go through quite a few evolutions before we are happy that we have a biomarker for aging or a panel of biomarkers for aging. But when you look at these, this is the way that we actually, across these 4 pillars, actually manage
I'm
all
just
of
on a
our
listening
data.
to a. I don't have to listen. I've just
Trish,
got to be seen.
can you stop? Can you mute, Trish?
Sorry.
Can you mute?
Yeah. So when you look at that in terms of cardiovascular disease, this is just an example. So Cyclarity is a company that, as many of you know, they're based in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area. They're an example of a company that are really helping in terms of that preventative cause of atherosclerosis, and obviously ultimately cardiovascular disease and heart attack and stroke. But you can see that, of course, the current approach across all of these is the traditional sick care model. And I think the concept of the difference between the whole infrastructure of healthcare, which actually, as we all know, in the majority of cases is sick care, is now moving into this concept of healthcare. And of course, the vocabulary associated with everything is very interesting. You know, I've just come back from the Evolution Summit. They don't talk about longevity. They just purely talk about health span. And of course, the vocabulary around our industry, you have to be very careful about it. And of course, that's why people get upset with the sort of things that are happening, perhaps with Brian Johnson talking about don't die and all of those types of things. But actually, there are very important triggers for us to think about how we position this as an industry as we start to engage more with regulators, engage more with, obviously, the governments that are going to be funding a lot of these therapies that we're all working on. So we actually, through this process, worked with George Church. He helps us with the navigation of our structure of the 25 domains of longevity. And I'm not going to spend forever going through each one of them, but when you look at the ones that relate to the Longevity Biotech Association, we see that these are really the biotech drivers that sit within the 25 domains of our longevity analysis. So you can see here, we actually put regeneration, reprogramming, and rejuvenation into different buckets, because a lot of people are talking about reprogramming. There are companies happening, reforming and getting funded all the time in this space. But I won't read all of these out for you, but you can see here that obviously regeneration is talking about, you know, restoring damaged and missing tissues and organs. When you then go to reprogramming, of course, this is reprogramming cells. And of course, since this slide was put together, we just published an article about what's happening in this space. And there are people that are looking at all different ways now of reprogramming at a cellular level. So this is going to be a very interesting space, and it's going to fill up very quickly. But obviously, there are going to be a few companies that don't succeed. And then, of course, you've got rejuvenation, which, of course, is the concept of clearing cells, rejuvenations of organelles within the cell. So these are the first 3 that we have as part of our 25 domains, but the ones that are relating to biotech. And I won't read out every one for you because, of course, you know, that's a bit tedious for you. But you can see that whether it's at a metabolic level, when you're looking at menopause, or obviously looking at gene therapies, which, of course, have got great hope themselves, these are really how we identify the key drivers within biotech, within the longevity industry. And of course, when you get to the end of all of this, again, I won't read out all of them for you. I'm sure the slides will be available if you'd like them afterwards. I'm sure, Nir, you'll be able to help us distribute them. But of course, it's the discovery platforms that are actually very active in this space. So discovery platforms, as you'll see in a moment, are attracting the majority of the capital, but of course, they're churning out a lot of therapeutic potential, which of course all needs to be tested. And of course, there's the potential of backlogs both in regulatory and testing. The key thing is that we don't count cancer into our data, although, of course, some people would consider very much that cancer is an aging disease. If we counted in cancer companies, it would be very disruptive to the data because it's such a large part of the industry. There's my QR code. If anybody would like to contact me and get access to the slides or have got any more information that they'd like from me, please feel free to reach out. Over 3 trillion annually in the USA alone is spent on the diseases of aging. It's a huge burden to society. And of course, really at a personal level, at an existential level, at a family level, we all know people that have suffered or are suffering from these diseases of aging, and it costs a lot. So when you look at what we're trying to do as an industry, of course, we're trying to turn it around. We're trying to get to that position where, of course, we're looking at really trying to identify and address either at a systemic level or at a multiple disease level, the aging that's happening within all of our bodies, rather than obviously the sick care model, which is treating one disease at a time. And I personally am very excited about what's happened this last year with Novo Nordisk. I think it's been a very interesting journey since ARDD, when I started to analyze it more deeply myself. I published this article while I was actually at ARDD. But I think these GLP-1s and the work that's happening in the weight loss and diabetes prevention field is fascinating. And I tell you why. Again, I'm a marketing guy, so I'm looking at this from the perspective that governments around the world are actually approving this drug. Being overweight in the majority of cases is not actually a disease. Aging itself, obviously, we would like to consider can be categorized as a disease, but there are many that think that it never will be by the FDA. But of course, governments are paying for this drug now. People are paying for it on the grey market, of course, but actually it's now legitimately entering into the public healthcare systems, which I think is really fascinating. And of course, what's happened to Novo Nordisk is phenomenal, right? They've become Europe's biggest company by market capitalization. They've taken over the GDP of their host country, Denmark. And what happens when you look at what's the hype that sits behind all of this? This is just obviously a few scrapes from what's happening on the FT. The reality is, of course, is that this is now looking like it could be some kind of wonder drug. So when you look at the headlines that sit on the FT that talk about this particular drug, fast forward perhaps no more than 5 years, what this will look like when we're actually in the longevity industry. And you can see here that it's going to be very exciting, and the buzz that is created around the world when this actually finally happens for us all is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Alex Colville of Age One published a very interesting analysis of the GLP-1s and what the first aging drug could actually look like in terms of its value as an actual asset for its pharmaceutical company, which of course is very exciting. Nice big number on the chart there. When you look at the way that the data was built, it was quite interesting, the assumptions that they put behind it. But I do really feel that the work that's going on within the association, the destination that we're trying to get to is going to be huge. And this whole thing is going to be an enormous industry. So when you look at the way that we are looking at the industry, as many of you will know, we run a daily news service. And I have to say, I've got a fantastic team that really know what they're doing. They're very well connected now. And of course, the great thing for us is that companies are coming to us to share their news. We're not chasing them, which is a very nice position to be in. And I literally just went onto the investment page of our website, just scraped a few of the articles that are on there. And what we try to do very clearly is only ever address companies that are in the longevity space. And you can see that obviously bottom left there's Merck there, but this is really interesting because big pharma's in on the game. But of course, when you're looking to count big pharma in, that's quite a big challenge. But some great news here on this slide. You've obviously got the announcement that was made by Fauna Bio, they've signed a very exciting contract. Of course, it's not revenue yet, but of course, it just shows you how Fauna, as a very small company, can go to a very successful position very quickly. And then Moonwalk just came out of nowhere, left field, and they've raised 57 million, and they're now in the epigenetic reprogramming marketplace. So again, you can see there's a lot happening. It's accelerating. You know, it's a sort of it's a bounty of riches for us every day when we open up our email and see what's going on. And then when you look at how you have to count that, people are quoting our data, which is great, and we're really pleased about that. But it's really where do you count? So, for example, if we've got one biotech company that's a longevity biotech, they may have 3 assets, and one of those may be in clinical, and 2 of them may be not in clinical. So how would you count that company? Would that company be overall in clinical, or would its single asset be in clinical? And then you scale it up, and then you look at bigger biotechs that are out there that probably wouldn't consider themselves actually at this time to be members of the Longevity Biotech Association, but many respects they could be, because they're working on the diseases of aging, and they're using some of the therapies and techniques that we've got in the Longevity Biotech Association community, but on a much larger scale. The challenge for us, of course, is when you start to consider why we don't count cancer into our data, we don't count big pharma into our data, because, of course, you know, they're highly complex businesses. It's very difficult to isolate their particular revenue lines on the work that they're doing out of areas such as longevity or immunity. But when we start to count the data, this is really where we pull together the work that we do on our data. And as you can see here, 2022 was an annual report that we put together. We're just putting the final touches now on the data for the full year 2023. And what we do is we publish quarterly reports on the whole of the industry, so we can see what the trends are and what's happening, both in terms of where the investor capital is going, but also what the numbers look like. And I'm going to share some of those numbers with you today. So the interesting thing is when you look at the overall progress by domain, across the various domains associated with longevity, as we count them within our 25, it's very encouraging to see that, of course, a lot of them are still in preclinical, but things are moving to the right, which is very exciting. So to me, when people say, well, okay, well, how soon are we now going to get a longevity drug on the market? Of course, there are going to be many that don't make it to the final stages of the clinical process, but some will. And the data that we're now building, and I have to say, we're building it now because it's a very important question that we need to answer. It's complicated, but we need to look at every company, we need to look at every asset, and we need to look at every stage that they are on the pipeline to do a much more detailed analysis of how the industry is moving to the right. But the great news is it's happening. When I entered the industry in 2018, I'm sure it wouldn't have been as far to the right as it is here. And it's very exciting to see this happening. And I'm sure within the next 5 years, we're going to see a drug approved from this community out on the marketplace. So when you look at the capitalization, how the market capital is working, you can see here that the discovery platforms are attracting really the lion's share of the capital. This is billions of dollars, as you can see here, over the last 10 years. And of course, you can see the other ones there. Xenotherapeutics at the far end isn't attracting as much capital at this stage, but of course it's quite a complex approach, but likewise it still has lots of potential. So is the right capital going into the right companies? Well, I mean, I question sometimes that there are some companies that struggle really hard to get funding. I mean, like Fauna, for example. I mean, you know, they were raising capital last year. All of a sudden, they've accelerated very quickly to being in the position that they are. So I think that analysis of what's happening in terms of the finances is incredibly important. And the key thing is really what's happening in the overall industry. Now, the data that I'm sharing with you here is the overall industry. So this is all 25 categories of longevity. So this is not just pure biotech. And you can see that 2021 was the breakout year. Obviously, that's when markets were high. And I saw a very interesting chart that showed the decline in biotech investing more or less tracked exactly the dot-com bubble bursting. And I'm sure many of us have felt the pain associated with that. And of course, when you look at 2022, that data is interesting because, of course, it includes 3 billion associated with Altos Labs. So if you take Altos out of the equation, you know, 2022 shows a relatively big decline in the actual capitalization of the market. And of course, 2023 has been particularly horrible. Now, this data goes up to September. We are collating the updated data for the full year 2023, and we'll be publishing this next month, so you can see what's happened. But I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that later. So this is where the capital is coming on. This is the stage of capital, as you can see here. A lot of early stage VC, which is very encouraging. It shows that money is going into these early stage businesses. But likewise, interestingly, a lot of late stage VC. But we saw the majority of that actually happening in 2021. So in terms of where the money's going, these are the top 5 domains associated with the capital that's going into Longevity Biotech. And in terms of the concept of where that goes in relation to the overall industry in 2022 and 2023, well, obviously, it's been pretty brutal. It's been tough for us as well, I have to say, because part of our business is supporting companies with capital raising, and that's been particularly challenging. And, you know, we've heard all of the stories that have come out of it, but not too many failures and not too much consolidation as yet. But you can see here, in terms of total financing by quarter, you can see the full year 2022, and you can see the first 3 quarters of 23 and how things were trending. So having trained as a graphic designer, of course, I put a nice positive arrow in there. So there is a definite move in the right direction. But of course, really, we're not in the summits of where we were back in 2021. And I think that really the experience that I'm seeing at the moment is telling me that it's going to be pretty much the same in 2024. I don't think there's going to be a big shift. I just realized there's a typo on there. It should be Q3 2023 at the end there. In terms of the amount of capital that's going in, so the rounds are getting slightly larger, as you can see there, 25% larger over those 3 quarters, which is encouraging. So there's obviously more liquidity coming into the marketplace, more capital. But of course, a lot of companies, VC companies, are protecting their existing assets. So getting new companies funded is quite challenging. And the work that the likes of Vita Dow are doing is very helpful because, of course, they're still helping those early stage companies that will be coming up to that venture level over the next couple of years for them. So, of course, the US is the dominant player. You know, California itself is a big chunk of that 73% of the United States. And really, in terms of where the industry is going now, of course, we interviewed Dave Gogol. Many of you will know him from Methuselah Foundation. He's a very interesting guy, as I'm sure many of you know. And we interviewed him, and this was the quote he gave us. And I think it's very relevant because really, at the end of the day, this is going to be a time for the investors to get into it. There are some very encouraging investors in the space, like NFX. You know, they're very active. They're true believers in the space, and they're the ones that are going to help the others come in. I mean, we speak with a lot of these investors, A16Z, others that are in the Silicon Valley, but also we also speak to big pharma, and they're all engaged and interested. But unfortunately for all of us, the capital isn't moving in the liquidity that we would like at the moment. A very interesting fact for you. This is data from our website. You know, we're a website, so we spend a lot of time thinking about data and traffic. And you can see over the period of this period between September 22 and August last year. I mean, I just scraped it from our site, but basically you can see the growth in search traffic. So we can see really that there's a growing interest in this space. Of course, some of this search traffic is going to be from consumers trying to understand what David Sinclair has recently said, or where do I, you know, what's the best NMN product? But likewise, there's growing interest in longevity. And I'm sure all of you have felt it when you're in conversations with people. You're not evangelizing longevity anymore. People understand it. Whether they're engaged in it yet or not as a market, of course, is very difficult to understand, you know, until you have these conversations with people. But I'm very confident that the appetite is absolutely massively growing. So I mentioned that we're going to be pushing out our full year report 2023. I haven't got the data yet, so I can't even give you an insight as to what that data looks like. I'm pretty sure that Q4 would be an improvement on Q3. We've seen a lot of deals happening, which is, as you saw on that previous slide, there's a lot happening in terms of pure play longevity biotechs as well. So looking forward to seeing that data. A short word about us. So I mentioned that most of you know us as a news website. We also run an SEC compliant investment brokerage. I'm just about to do my SEC exams, which I have to say is a little bit daunting because it's 80 hours of reading. But we also work with consumers. So we've done our fair share of educating consumers. Candidly, we target consumers because we want to get sufficient eyeballs for our advertisers to be happy and keep coming back to us. But actually, what we're going to be doing as a company, we're going to be moving more into consumer education because we feel that's a big part of our remit as well. Not the work that we do on what we call the B2B news website, but we see that really educating consumers and actually facilitating them to be able to access interventions, their age and so forth, their epigenetic age, we think is going to be a big part of our role in the industry going forward. I think the exciting thing for us is that now we're being quoted as an industry analyst now in mainstream media. So we speak regularly with the Wall Street Journal. New York Times has covered us. We did an article in the European publication Sifted, which is part of the FT. And yeah, it's great to know that people are coming to us now as a brand, which is very encouraging for us. But likewise, mainstream media, as we all know, is now really sitting up and taking notice of what we're doing in this industry. So that in itself is incredibly encouraging. You can see here our traffic growth is also encouraging. You know, so this shows we're growing, so therefore the industry is growing. We had an absolute breakout month in July where we hit 1.25 million users, which was, I have to say, a big spike. It dropped off after that, but it was very exciting for us when we saw that. It really felt like we'd arrived. And of course, part of our relationship with the industry is with the investors. So we work very hard to build and maintain relationships with investors. As I mentioned earlier, we're also working with the VC arms of Big Pharma. And of course, you know, we are the quality of the investment opportunity we bring to them is very important. So we are really quite selective about the companies that we work with because of course, it's quite challenging to get these companies away. And as you can see here, this is just a scrape from our system. This is the data sets that we work with. So you can see here, this is our investor data set. But when you bring that together with our biotech data set, you can see how we're matching the investment category with the company category. So the categorization of the 25 domains has been a really important baseline for the way that we look at the industry and analyze the industry, but also how we operate our business. The great news is that we've now got 970 longevity companies in our data sets, and just over 500 of those actually classify as longevity biotechs. And we've got over 1,000 investors as well. So big numbers, but what you do with them is important. And I have to say, you know, it's a growing part of our business. It's not fully formed yet. We've got some exciting things that we're going to be announcing during the course of the year on that side. So we also help companies with our media platform. I had a conversation today with a company that's got a NAD+ therapy, which is actually a pharmaceutical version of NAD+, and they're looking to see how they can actually communicate their difference from the NAD+ or the NAD+ precursors that are in the marketplace, because they're a serious therapeutic. So we actually put together a suite of services that we support companies with. I have to say we charge them for this because we need to make some money sometime. But you can see here that we have got a lot of services that we can help companies with. For example, we even use our data sets to help companies put their business plans together because, of course, you know, we anonymize the data. We don't let any of our data go out, but we can actually help companies understand their ranking in the industry and likewise what their competitors are doing in terms of both their valuation as well as their IP and clinical process. So the other part, of course, is how that fits into the program. So a lot of people are raising safes at the moment. So we tend to bundle these packages together to try and help them with their communications. And this sits aside from our brokerage business. So we have a comms business and we have a brokerage business, and sometimes those two come together. And as I say, this is the way that we work with biotechs. So we look to introduce capital. We take 4% of the capital that we introduce, and then likewise 4% of that is converted into stock. So we're working with companies where we really believe in their technology, and therefore we have a part of their success going forward as well. So as I say, I do believe that longevity biotechs are going to absolutely change the world. It's a pleasure to be here with the Longevity Biotech Association today. I'm slightly terrified by some of the questions that you're probably going to ask me, because please remember, I'm just a sales and marketing guy. But thanks for listening today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's exciting. First of all, I get it that the success of your company is indicative of the whole field. It must work this way, and you're probably the first to see the benefits, because then you tell them what to do. Also, by the way, it's nice to see that you have a business plan. So you're going to also reap the benefits that we all have. We all hope to reap. So that's great. So I want to open it to the public, but there are several things I just want to make sure that I understand. I was going to ask you what's the most exciting area, but I would get the GLP-1 as a really good example. In fact, from our perspective, I just published, or a paper was accepted to say that GLP-1 is one of those FDA-approved drugs that should be considered as geroscience, and there's evidence from the preclinical, from the hallmarks, from everything else. So unless you have something to say, I want to skip that and really ask you, what do you think are the most disruptive factors that will affect the industry going forward that you haven't mentioned?
Well, I think that governments are sitting up now. I think that I'm seeing that disruption can be different things, okay? And of course, the scale that this industry needs to work at has to ultimately be at a government level scale. And that's definitely been changing. Now, it's not disruptive, but it's really, really encouraging to see what's happening there. I went to the Hevolution event, and I have to say, of course, it was a very well put on event. It was star-studded. It was very smooth and very well produced. But actually, I genuinely felt that when I left that conference, that it really felt to me that governments were engaged, and that really what we see now is that people are really truly understanding that there is a sick care industry and a sick care system that they're all supporting. They all know the demographic time bomb that's coming at them. And I do really feel, even if you look at Novo Nordisk, they've actually put up capital now to start a new team. I think they called it transformative prevention or something like that. So I think this concept now, the world is changing, right? The world is absolutely changing. We know that it's been changing for a long time, albeit slowly. But I think the thing that's disruptive for me is the fact that people are really starting to understand now that aging is plastic, and they're sitting up and taking notice of that, whether they're governments or individuals. And I feel that that's really exciting. I'm hopeful that Altos Labs will do something public this year. I think it's about time, and obviously they've got a lot of capital to put to work, and I hope that they become something that becomes highly disruptive in the industry because of their capitalization and their pedigree, as well as their footprint. So I expect that we should hear something from them, and I hope that's going to be disruptive. I hope they don't end up being like another Calico. And then, of course, this whole concept of systemic rejuvenation, albeit a long way from, well, I say a fair distance now from being inhuman. Of course, there's a lot of capital going into this, whether it's cellular reprogramming or even mitochondrial dysfunction. I feel that those are some of the really interesting disruptive technologies that people are funding. Of course, we won't see their results yet, but I feel that those are really exciting areas that we're all part of. Many people on the call will be part of, but that's really happening now. And so I think it's a combination of two things. It's a scientific level, it's a political level, it's an economic level, and I can see all of that happening right now, and I feel that's very encouraging.
Let me ask you, so okay, here, Jerry, let you go first. I have many questions, but I want to give you guys. Jerry, go ahead.
Sure. First off, just to let everybody know, we are working with Phil currently. I was excited, and I've had great conversations with Phil over the last 2.5 years, and I think he's a tremendous resource and value to what we do. And for many of us, we can't afford to hire strategic market research group. Phil has a plethora of options, both on the market research side, but also potentially on the IR side. So I'll just say that I think highly of Phil and his team. Phil, my question for you, I keep looking for the sparks here to get us rolling. And was at a JPM and at a couple different sessions, you hear the range from still big pharma folks poo-pooing aging, not understanding what we're talking about. But then we have Moonwalk Therapeutics with a high quality group syndicate of investors. And so I asked maybe comment on what you're seeing and thinking, what events like that mean. and then also with folks like Lilly and others getting involved with companies in our space.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I'll answer the second one, Jerry. I think that, well, our experience is that really pharmaceutical companies are interested in investing, but they only really want to invest at phase 2 and beyond. It makes sense, obviously, because they're going to be expecting to invest heavily either through their business development teams acquiring an asset, or obviously investing heavily to support them through to phase 3. So that's really where big pharma's in. I mean, obviously, you've got a few anomalies like Pfizer being part of VitaDow. So you've got some breakout departments in big pharma that are interested in the space and engaged in it. But of course, at a board level, they've still got to do the heavy lifting there in relation to understanding how their whole business needs to be turned around from the sick care to the healthcare model. And then in relation to the syndicates of investors that are out there, obviously they're the tier 1 people, like Arch and so on, and Kozler, they're involved. I think that the challenge may be that they still might be looking at these companies and these assets through the lens of traditional healthcare investing, traditional biotech investing, which is fine. If the companies actually get funded and get away, happy days. And I think that it's something that is going to be an interesting one for our industry is, will the longevity industry ultimately just blend into what has been obviously the ultimate big pharma industry, or will it stand alone and always be an outlier? And I think obviously at the moment we are an outlier. I'd love to have spent some time at JPM, but I just can't afford the time at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I still think that we're on the outside, Jerry. And I think that really what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have a semaglutide moment. We're going to need to be in a position where somebody breaks through, somebody's got clinical evidence to support reversal of age. One would hope at a systemic level, but I think that's even further out. But I think we just got to sit tight and do the work that we're doing. As I showed you earlier, things are moving further to the right. It's going to happen, but it's just not going to happen as quickly as we'd all like it to be.
I would add that there, maybe we should think of the pharma that are doing aging or longevity and they don't realize it, right? I mean, how do we get the GLP-1 industry to realize that? How do we get SGLT2 inhibitors? That is a fantastic story. It's a drug that was specifically developed for diabetes for a specific mechanism, and it has unbelievable effects in clinical study to prevent kidney disease and heart disease and overall mortality. How do we make them think that they're an aging company? How do we make Merck, who has a new CETP inhibitor that's based a bit about what I sold them from centenarians, something that came from centenarians and Ionis? How do we make them see that they're aging? In other words, it's maybe easier to convert them than to convert others. I would say also that Regeneron has really said that aging is something they want to do, and they're working at that. So yeah, there is this progress, but this link of, hey, you're in aging and you don't know that is really an opportunity for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, you've seen the FOMO now with the GLP-1s. There's a lot of acquisition strategy going on there. There's a lot happening, and everybody's kind of going, wow, this is going to be the next big thing. And it's going to be the same. There will be some companies that will move early. They'll have brave teams, innovative teams, whether they're on the finance or the scientific side, that will get engaged. They might not be the tier 1s, but they're going to be big enough to make a difference. And then when it breaks, this industry will explode. I mean, the M&A activity in 5 years' time, in my opinion, will be huge.
Right. But then there are other opportunities. Look what BioAge is doing with Lilly. The GLP-1 decreases body weight. It's a calorie mimetic, but you lose lean body mass. So they're saying, hey, why don't we have a drug like that and you don't lose lean body mass and you get an extra anti-aging effects, right? So I think there are opportunities that are coming from the LBA to the pharmacy that they'll be happy to convert them.
Yeah, and I do think, Nir, that the opportunity from the LBA's perspective, in terms of its membership, as I've shown, we've got data on companies that are working on aging diseases or are using techniques that are sitting within the strategies that are within the LBA. There's an opportunity to bring them in and to educate them and evangelize to them. It might not happen at the board level, but it could definitely happen at a let's call it a departmental level. And the interesting thing is that I can't remember the name of the gentleman, but we're speaking with we're interviewing one of the Novo scientists that was involved in the GLP-1 program. So I think we're going to be publishing an article on that fairly soon.
Right. Let us be involved if you need us for that. Another quick question. You mentioned Altos as disruptive and in some ways evolution, but look, the scientists of Altos will tell you nobody told us to develop drugs. They took us for the science, and they hope that the science will be disruptive. But my understanding is that Altos is going to spend some of the money on industry that's not related to their development. Evolution is the same. So what do you know about the percent of money that those guys are going to put in, and they're going to put it in the LBA, I think, clients?
I'm sure. I can only speak about evolution with any actual knowledge. I know that Bill Green's obviously now in position in terms of their venture team, and we were sharing deals with them, but they were in a position where they just didn't have the manpower or the human power to be able to take on all of that. And I think they're fixing that quite quickly. And I do believe that evolution is kind of getting its groove on now. It's starting to staff up. It's got a lot of activity going on in Riyadh, but of course their investment offices on the East Coast. And I feel that they're going to become much more active, and we're going to see further announcements from them, which are going to be actual equity-based investments rather than grants and the other work that they've announced so far. I mean, I spoke with Mahmoud about this, and he was saying, look, when we made our announcement about the amount of capital we intend to put into the industry, it was a very small team. And I think that now's the time where I think this year we're going to see more. I'm pretty sure we'll see more out of them. I don't know, but that's my gut feel.
Terrific. So any closing remarks? You're so excited about the future, and obviously your company is kind of helping it, but any closing remarks of that's related to collaboration and possibilities for all of us, and how to use you effectively, how for you to use us?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that I have some ideas, Nir, where I'm sure the resources that we have working more closely with the LBA could be very helpful. Now, of course, everybody in the LBA is an independent commercial organization, so there's sort of lines of demarcation around that. And I'd be really happy to have a conversation with you about that, how we could be more tightly integrated. I think one of the key things for us is that we intend over the next year or so to start making our data actually publicly available. We don't, it's all proprietary at the moment. We anonymize the data, and the charts that you've seen today are basically, our data, but nobody else has access to them. So we're looking to move into a SaaS model for our data. So that could be something that I feel would be useful for us to be working together. And really, in terms of my closing message, I think on a personal basis, as well as individuals around the call and in the association, is that Winston Churchill quote. It's like, keep going. This is really tough. I mean, the times at the moment are very challenging. There are some successes, and even there are some breakout successes, but we're all in the trenches at the moment, looking at the capital markets as they are, trying to evangelize into an industry that doesn't fully get it at the moment, but it's getting there. I think we just got to hang in there. We've got to work hard. We've all got to support and consolidate around ourselves and support each other at events and through recommendation to investors or to scientists or whatever it may be. But yeah, my message is let's stick together. It might be taking a few more years than we want, but it's really happening. So keep the faith.
I totally second that. Thank you very much. Thank you all the members that are here.